Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall. And I have decided, for good or ill, it's been mostly ill so far, that the next thing we're going to do is going to be the top shelf of the middle bookcase, which is all Penguin Classic Deluxe editions, all seated underneath a couple of teddy bears. And the next one that we're going to do, these Penguin Classic Deluxe editions, those of you who maybe don't know, are not normal Black Spide Penguin Classics. They are the Penguin editorial team and design team deciding to pull out all the stops and make some of these things just beautiful. And they have done a great job. It's amazing. It's just amazing. They festoon these things with new art, whereas the Penguin Black Spine Classics are designed to keep the price down. So it's generally art that won't cost Penguin an arm and a leg. And their format is beautiful too. They have deckled edges and French flaps and a tougher, more matte finish paper for the covers. They are an incredible performance, a very collectible thing. I haven't bothered to do that, but even though I don't intentionally collect these things, if I'm at a used bookstore and I see a Penguin Classic Deluxe edition that I don't have, I grab it right away. Of course I do. Largely independent of whether or not I actually like the book, and that happened last time. Because the first of these that we saw was Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. And I read you the riot act about the book and about Joyce. And we're right back to that. So this will not be a long Penguin Classic. This is Dubliners by James Joyce, and with an introduction by Colin McCann. Now, this is very different because the Portrait of an Artist had an introduction by Karl Ove Knausgaard, which was revolting. And that sometimes happens. Sometimes the Penguin editorial team will go after a popular author or try to buy an essay by a popular author to use as an introduction, even if that essay is odious, just to bank on the name of the author. They do that. There's a Penguin Classic Deluxe edition that we will not be seeing of 3 novels of Edith Wharton that has an introduction by Jonathan Franzen in which he marvels over and over again at the fact that she could be so popular as an author despite being, a little homely. It's just unbelievable. I read that essay first in the New Yorker. I couldn't believe I was reading it. In the 21st century, I couldn't believe I was reading it. And then Penguin decided to make that the introduction to that volume. Now, I would yearn for a Penguin Classic Deluxe edition of 3 great Edith Wharton novels, but I'm not going to have that thing attached to it. No way. And the same thing is true with Portrait of an Artist, only more so because there I don't like the book itself. And I don't like anything that Karl Ove Knausgaard has ever written that I've read. This is very different. Colin McCann is brilliant, and he is his introduction is fantastic here. It's actually well worth reading. Dubliners, maybe not so much. The Penguin apparatus, again, not attributed to anybody, starts off the introduction of this book by saying, perhaps the greatest short story collection in the English language. OMG. OMG, no. For those of you who might not know this book, it is a 1914 collection by James Joyce of short stories that are thematically interconnected, and it most certainly is not the greatest short story collection in the English language. Quite a few of you will be familiar with a couple of these. The Dead, for instance, is one of the short stories in here that is anthologized everywhere and inflicted on school children. I ordinarily don't like mandatory reading of any kind, especially canonical works, which this unfortunately has become. I don't like that because it tends to put people off reading. Canonical imposition of works like that tends to put people off reading, and I don't like that. I make an exception for something like The Dead because anybody that can be dissuaded from reading this book is fine by me. But I nevertheless have read it. Occasionally it has loomed, in the distant past, it has loomed on my horizon that maybe I would be asked to teach it. I never was, thank God. But you can see how beautiful this is. The art is, again, by Roman Muradov, who did the admittedly glorious artwork for Portrait of an Artist. This is the same way. You've got this fantastic cover. You've got these paneled sequences for the back. And then you've got original artwork for the flaps as well. The flaps would ordinarily be just exposition. The Penguin Classic Deluxe editions made the very good decision to include them in the artwork so that you get a whole production. And they're delightful. They're absolutely delightful. And they actually prompted me. When I first got this I still have the pub sheet in this. I got this from Penguin. When did I get this? 2014, so before we were talking to each other. And I did reread it because I got it, hoping, with an open mind. I reread it thinking, well, here's a beautiful edition, the most beautiful paperback edition of this book you're ever going to see. Surely you should read it again and see. And it is the most bearable thing that Joyce wrote. I'll give it that. I liked it a tiny, tiny, infinitesimal fraction more reading it in this edition. So unlike Portrait of an Artist, which I just hate, I would probably keep this. But I'll probably keep both of them because the Penguin Classic Deluxe editions are so lovely. But anyway, we're not going to be long today because we're dealing with the same author and the same kinds of concerns. So this is another example where the thing that I would ordinarily end a Daily Penguin with would be a recommendation one way or another. Either read it, don't read it, or read this edition or whatever. Here, again, as with Portrait, I suppose you have to read this. You most certainly do not have to waste the years of time necessary to read Joyce's 2 baggy monster novels. You most certainly do not need to do that. But his shorter books, probably you do. Probably you do. The Dubliners, I think, gives a clearer example than anything else that he wrote of what he might have done had he stayed sane, had he stayed a normal, non-pretentious author and written great prose. It's possible he could have done that, and I think this shows you something of what that would have been like. So on that level, just in terms of, you can't ignore James Joyce. I wish you could. 100 years from now, no one will be able to ignore Karl Ove Knausgaard, and I will wish they could, because it's very much of a muchness, especially since students, for instance, are being urged or told to read this author in place of authors they should be reading instead, authors who are much better. Even Irish authors who are much better. There are plenty of them that were contemporaries of Joyce who are not read anywhere outside of Ireland now that are much better than he is. But anyway, so I can recommend this in a kind of begrudging way because it's a canonical classic, so you kind of have to read it. I can certainly recommend this edition because this is beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing. It's a Penguin made a beautiful thing. But aside from that, I can't recommend it in the sense that you want me to recommend things. And so many of you have written to me and said, boy, I can tell when you are talking about a Penguin that is an author you love, it's really obvious. And that's not going to be the case here. I don't think there's any more James Joyce in our Daily Penguins. I don't think there are. I have Portrait and I have Dubliners in these Penguin Classic Deluxe editions, and the fact that they're in deluxe editions is a large part of the reason why I've kept them. I had for a while one of those old olive green trade paperbacks of James Joyce's Ulysses. I don't think I have that anymore, and I'm pretty sure that at least in America, Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake have never been in Black Spine Classics, so I'm pretty sure there's no more Joyce, so you won't have to go through this again. Tomorrow, when we do our Daily Penguin, it won't be James Joyce, so we'll see who it will be. Maybe it'll be somebody a little more palatable and I can talk about a little more enthusiasm. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you then. Thank you, Book 2.